A Brief History of Siddhartha Gautama. The Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama, who later became known as the Buddha, was born in the year 623 BCE. His father, King Suddhodana, ruled over the kingdom of Kapilavastu, and he was known for his wisdom and kindness. His mother, Queen Maya, was a very wise and virtuous woman. When she was 45 years old, she became pregnant with Prince Siddhartha. After a full 10 months of pregnancy, while traveling back to the capital city, they reached a place called Lumbini, about 5 miles away. It was there that Prince Siddhartha was born. Upon his birth, a miraculous event occurred. Prince Siddhartha took 7 steps, and with each step, a lotus flower bloomed beneath his feet. Then he raised his eyes to the sky with one hand and pointed to the earth with the other, saying, "In heaven above and on earth below, I am the Supreme." It is said that at that moment, heavenly flowers fell from the sky, and 9 dragons sprayed water to bathe the newborn prince. His parents, overjoyed by the arrival of their son in their old age, celebrated his birth. When the prince returned to the palace, the entire kingdom celebrated. A wise monk named Asita visited and predicted that the prince would become either a great universal monarch or an enlightened sage known as the Buddha. King Suddhodana, filled with hopes and dreams for his son, named him Siddhartha, which means one who achieves all goals and wishes. This marks the beginning of the remarkable journey of Prince Siddhartha, who would eventually become the Buddha, the Enlightened One. 7 days after the birth of Prince Siddhartha, his mother passed away. His aunt, Queen Mahaprajapati, became the new queen and cared for the young prince as her own. She showered him with love and ensured he had a comfortable and happy upbringing. By the age of 12, he had gained knowledge in various subjects. Later, he also learned martial arts and military strategy, excelling in these disciplines as well. During a royal competition, quick to learn and understand, by the age of 12, he had gained knowledge in various subjects. Later, he also learned martial arts and military strategy, excelling in these disciplines as well. During a royal competition, he displayed exceptional physical strength and remarkable archery skills. While the best of the royal princes could shoot an arrow through 3 drums, Prince Siddhartha astonishingly pierced 7 drums with a single arrow. When he turned 16, his father arranged his marriage to Princess Yasodhara from a neighboring kingdom. They had a son named Rahula. When Rahula was born, Prince Siddhartha sighed and said, "Rahula has fettered me." He meant that the responsibilities of fatherhood had tied him down. King Suddhodana loved his son deeply and wanted him to succeed him as king. He built 3 palaces for Prince Siddhartha, one for each season, one for winter, one for summer, and one for the rainy season. The prince was surrounded by beautiful palace attendants and enjoyed a life of luxury and pleasure. However, Prince Siddhartha showed no interest in the worldly riches and happiness. Prince Siddhartha was a royal prince, but he was deeply dissatisfied with the inequalities in Indian society at that time. He often wondered, why are the Shudras treated as slaves? Aren't they human beings too? Is there a way to ensure that they can live in freedom and equality? One day, Prince Siddhartha accompanied his father to the countryside for a leisurely outing. He saw farmers toiling in the fields, their upper bodies exposed to the scorching sun, covered in mud, sweating profusely, and panting for breath. The oxen pulling the plow were suffering from wounds caused by ropes and beatings from the farmers. Plowing the soil exposed many insects, attracting birds that came to peck at them. The prince felt deep compassion for the suffering of the poor who endured such hardships just to survive. He also saw the tragic cycle of life, where creatures competed and even killed each other for survival. Under a large tree, Prince Siddhartha contemplated, how can I alleviate their suffering and help everyone live a more just life? He became lost in thought, almost forgetting to return to the palace. Later, during his journeys to 4 cities, he encountered the suffering of old age, illness, and death. He also observed the contentment of ascetic monks. These experiences led him to realize that everyone was subject to the inevitable suffering of old age, sickness, and death. Furthermore, he understood that all living beings, in their pursuit of survival, committed various sins and even resorted to violence, resulting in tragedies. Ultimately, everyone was headed towards the path of aging, illness, and death. This tragic cycle of life, this irrationality of existence, how could one find liberation from suffering? These questions troubled Prince Siddhartha deeply, and he could no longer find contentment in the palace, surrounded by honor and luxury. Finally, at the age of 29, on a moonlit night, he made the most significant decision of his life. He renounced his princely title, wealth, and left behind his parents and wife. With only his charioteer, Channa, and his white horse, Kantaka, he secretly departed from the palace, crossed the Anoma River, and ventured into the deep wilderness to seek the truth about suffering and the real purpose of life. After leaving the palace, Prince Siddhartha reached the banks of the Anoma River. There he took the momentous step of shaving his head, donning a simple robe, and renouncing his princely attire. He instructed his charioteer, Channa, to take his royal garments and white horse back to the palace. Channa wept, and the horse neighed, reluctant to leave the prince. When King Suddhodana saw Channa return without the prince, he was filled with sorrow. He immediately sent ministers to bring his son back, but Prince Siddhartha's determination to seek enlightenment was unshaken. He told the ministers who came to retrieve him, "I will not return unless I attain true wisdom, Buddhahood." Unable to persuade the determined prince to return, King Suddhodana then chose 5 young relatives to follow Siddhartha and accompany him on his spiritual journey. Siddhartha traveled into the wilderness, eventually arriving at the ascetic grove of Uruvela near the Nairanjana River. There, he encountered ascetics who practiced extreme austerities in their pursuit of heavenly rewards. He observed their severe practices, but concluded that such practices were not the path to enlightenment. He decided to continue his quest elsewhere. The ascetics advised him to go south of the Ganges River to find a renowned teacher who could guide him toward his goal. Following their advice, he crossed the Ganges and reached the kingdom of Magadha. There he went begging for food in Rajagaha and proceeded to the foothills of the Pandava mountains. King Bimbisara of Magadha learned of Siddhartha's presence and invited him to the palace, offering to share his kingdom and wealth and encouraging him to give up his ascetic life. However, Siddhartha remained steadfast in his pursuit of spiritual truth, declining the king's offer. He assured the king that if he achieved enlightenment, he would remember the king's kindness. Siddhartha bid farewell to King Bimbisara and continued his search for a qualified teacher. Siddhartha and his 5 companions embarked on a quest to find the most profound spiritual guidance. They met renowned teachers, including Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta, but found their teachings unsatisfactory. They continued their search for spiritual truth. Prince Siddhartha, now alone, crossed the Nairanjana River and reached the vicinity of the Bodhi tree near Mount Gaya. At the time, there were grass-cutting boys in the area, declining the king's offer. He assured the king that if he achieved enlightenment, he would remember the king's kindness. Siddhartha bid farewell to King Bimbisara and continued his search for a qualified teacher, declining the king's offer. He assured the king that if he achieved enlightenment, he would remember the king's kindness. Siddhartha bid farewell to King Bimbisara and continued his search for a qualified teacher. After 7 days and nights of deep meditation, it is said that at this moment, Siddhartha faced disturbances in his meditation from the evil Mara, who sent his daughters to tempt him and unleashed armies of demons to intimidate him. Siddhartha, however, remained resolute and unaffected by these distractions. Eventually, Mara was defeated. This legend illustrates Siddhartha's inner struggle against desires and worldly temptations. Once Mara was vanquished, Siddhartha concentrated his mind entirely and used his highest wisdom to contemplate the problems of all living beings on earth. Finally, at the age of 35, around 588 BCE, in the middle of the night, as he observed a bright star, he achieved a profound realization of all truths and attained supreme enlightenment. From this point on, people respectfully addressed him as the Buddha, and his honorific title became Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. What did the Buddha realize? The most crucial teaching is the law of dependent origination. It explains that the universe and human life arise from causes and conditions. All things exist due to the coming together of various causes and conditions. For instance, our physical bodies are the result of our parents' union, while our lives are the karmic consequence of our past actions, driven by ignorance and afflictions. To liberate ourselves from the suffering of old age, sickness, and death, we must eradicate the root affliction of ignorance through spiritual practice. When the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he exclaimed, "Wonderful, wonderful! All sentient beings possess the wisdom and virtues of a Buddha, but due to delusion and attachment, they cannot realize it. This means that all sentient beings have the potential to become Buddhas, but their Buddha nature is obscured by delusion and afflictions. Therefore, the Buddha's enlightenment involved understanding dependent origination, eliminating ignorance, and manifesting the inner purity and radiance of Buddha nature, which illuminated the world with the light of truth. After attaining enlightenment, the Buddha began his mission to teach and guide sentient beings. Initially, he went to Deer Park in Isipatana, where he taught the Four Noble Truths to 5 ascetics, including Kondana. These 5 individuals, upon hearing the Buddha's teachings, became the first 5 disciples, bhikkhus, and formed the early monastic community, Sangha. In the city of Varanasi, Prince Yasa, the son of a wealthy merchant, renounced his worldly life and joined the Buddha along with 50 companions. Yasa's parents, the merchant and his wife, also embraced Buddhism, becoming the first lay male and female devotees, respectively. The Buddha then traveled alone to the Gayasisa mountain, where he converted the 3 Kassapa brothers, who were leaders of a fire-worshipping sect. The eldest, Uruvela Kassapa, had 500 followers. The second, Gaya Kassapa, had 250 followers, and the youngest, Nadi Kassapa, also had 250 followers. All of them renounced their previous beliefs and became bhikkhus, bringing 1,000 new monastic followers into the fold. With the Kassapa brothers and his growing community, the Buddha journeyed to Magadha and was warmly received by King Bimbisara. The king and his subjects, profoundly impressed by the Buddha's teachings on dependent origination, wholeheartedly embraced Buddhism. King Bimbisara offered the Bamboo Grove Monastery as a residence for the Buddha and his disciples, marking the establishment of the first Buddhist monastery and the Buddha's base for preaching in ancient South India. During his stay at the Bamboo Grove Monastery, the Buddha's teachings attracted 2 exceptional individuals: Sariputta, known for his wisdom, and Moggallana, renowned for his psychic abilities. They both had large followings, and with their support, the Buddha's teachings spread further. Before long, Mahakashapa, the son of a wealthy man, became a bhikkhu and became the foremost in ascetic practices. After the Buddha's passing, he was entrusted with the Buddha's relics. In Savatthi, the householder Siddhartha, also known as Anathapindika, embraced Buddhism and built the Jetavana monastery as a gift to the Buddha and his monastic community. This monastery became the center of Buddhist activities in the northern region of India. King Pasenadi of Kosala and Queen Malika were among the devoted followers of the Buddha, demonstrating the breadth of support from all social classes. In the Buddha's 6th year of teaching, he returned to his homeland to visit his elderly father, King Suddhodana. His aunt, Pajapati Gautami, and several cousins, including Rahula, also became Buddhists and joined the monastic order. When King Suddhodana was in his 93rd year and gravely ill, the Buddha returned to comfort him. He delivered teachings, attended to the king's final moments, and performed the last rites with great filial piety. The Buddha was a compassionate and fearless guide for all. He regarded every individual as his own family and cared for the sick among his followers, cleaning their wounds and sewing clothes for blind monks. When conflicts arose, such as the water dispute between the Shakya clan and the Kolya clan, he intervened personally to mediate a resolution. His teachings also advocated democratic governance. The Buddha's compassion and wisdom touched everyone he encountered, regardless of their background, and they embraced his teachings with deep faith. The Buddha's followers ranged from kings, queens, and ministers to the poor, beggars, and slaves, representing all segments of society. This reflects his promotion of compassion and equality, emphasizing his great compassion in guiding and liberating sentient beings. The Buddha spent 45 years teaching his profound wisdom, tirelessly traveling and sharing his teachings with all who sought guidance. At the age of 80, in the great Mahaparinirvana, he made his way to Kushinagar from the kingdom of Magadha. In the grand Mahavana Grove in Kushinagar, he gave his final teachings. During this time, the Buddha's health declined, and he knew he had only 3 months left to live. Nevertheless, he continued his journey, sharing his teachings with the people of every village he passed through. In the village of Pava, a metalworker named Kunda offered the Buddha his final meal. Despite his weakening condition, the Buddha graciously accepted. As his illness progressed, he continued walking until he reached a serene grove of twin sala trees outside Kusinara. It was in this tranquil setting that the Buddha chose as the place for his final departure. Lying on his right side on a prepared robe, the Buddha was fatigued. At this moment, a follower of another faith named Subhata came to see him. Even in his weakened state, the Buddha shared his teachings with Subhata, who became his final disciple to attain enlightenment. Witnessing the Buddha's deteriorating health, Ananda and other disciples were deeply saddened. The Buddha comforted them, advising them to rely on the truth he had imparted and to seek liberation within that truth. He emphasized that all things are subject to change, including his own physical form, and must ultimately return to the natural order of cessation. Ananda and the disciples, respecting the Buddha's imminent passing, requested his guidance on 4 important matters. After the Buddha's parinirvana, who should they turn to as their teacher? Without the Buddha's physical presence, what should be their refuge? How should they handle misbehaving monks after the Buddha's passing? How should they preserve the teachings and ensure they inspire faith? The Buddha responded, after his parinirvana, they should turn to the Vinaya, monastic rules, as their teacher. In his absence, they should take refuge in the 4 mindfulnesses. To deal with unruly monks, they should silence them, refraining from engaging in conversation with them. They should begin all scriptures with the phrase, "Thus have I heard," indicating that these teachings were based on personal experience and trustworthy accounts. Ananda and the disciples, tearful yet filled with understanding, listened to the Buddha's words. The Buddha assured them, saying, "Do not grieve. Trust in yourselves. Hold fast to the lamp of truth. And in practicing these teachings, my Dharma body will always be with you." In the year 543 BCE, on a moonlit night in May, the Buddha entered parinirvana peacefully, surrounded by those who loved and revered him. King of the Kosalas and the Buddha's followers conducted a dignified cremation ceremony. His relics were divided among 8 kings who erected stupas to enshrine them. These stupas have survived to the present day, and the compassionate spirit of the Buddha's lifelong mission continues to be revered and admired by all. The teachings of Buddhism, also known as the Dharma, provide guidance on how to lead a meaningful life, as well as the path to enlightenment. From the time of his enlightenment until his passing into parinirvana, the Buddha continuously shared his teachings. He spoke for 45 years, from the initial teachings to the first 5 disciples in the deer park, to the final instructions to Subhadda in Kushinagar. These teachings spanned from his age of 35 to 80 in the year of his parinirvana. 90 days after his passing, a council of 500 enlightened monks, led by Mahakashyapa, convened at the Saptaparni caves on Vulture Peak outside Rajagra. They began the compilation of the Buddha's teachings into the Tripitaka, 3 baskets. First, the Vinaya Pitaka, the rules for monastic discipline, was recited by the virtuous Upali. Then Ananda, renowned for his vast knowledge, recited the Sutta Pitaka containing the discourses. These texts were meticulously scrutinized and accepted by the assembly. These scriptures were revised in subsequent councils and translated into various languages, spreading Buddhism worldwide. The Buddhist scriptures translated into various languages, including those in our country, have been preserved as a valuable cultural heritage. The teachings of Buddhism explain the true nature of the universe, the purpose of human life, and ethical principles. Buddhism guides us in cultivating virtuous behavior, awakening from ignorance, finding joy amidst suffering, and practicing selflessness for the benefit of all beings. It encompasses the most comprehensive truth in the world, addressing the fundamental questions of human existence. By studying and propagating the Dharma, we can transform our worldly existence into a path leading to ultimate bliss.
Na